We will now start chapter 3 of NCERT class 7 history, the Delhi Sultans. In chapter 2 we saw that the regions like the Kaveri Delta became the center of large kingdoms. For example, the Chola kingdom. Now, did you notice that there was no mention of a kingdom like Delhi as its capital? That was because Delhi became an important city only in the 12th century. So this point you should remember. Delhi first became the capital of a kingdom under the Tomar Rajputs, who were defeated in the middle of the 12th century by the Chauhans. Now, Tomars and Chauhans, under them only Delhi became an important commercial center. Many rich Jain merchants lived in the city and constructed several temples. Coins were minted here, which were called Delhi Wal. They had a wide circulation. Now, transformation of Delhi into a capital that controlled vast areas of the subcontinent started with the foundation of Delhi Sultanate in the beginning of the 13th century. Now, if you look in this table, from the beginning of the 13th century, we had 5 dynasties that together were called the Delhi Sultanate. We were having early Turkish rulers from 1206 to 1290. Then came Khalji dynasty from 1290 to 1320. Then Tughlaq dynasty from 1320 to 1414. And Sayyid dynasty, and then Lodi dynasty. Next topic is finding out about the Delhi Sultans. Recall from class 6 that Sultan is an Arabic word meaning ruler. Now we have sources like inscriptions, coins and architecture that provide a lot of information, but especially valuable are the histories, that is Tariq or Tawarik in plural, which were written in the Persian. Basically Tawarik, these were the books that provided information about administration under the Delhi Sultans. So these are the historical sources, and notice that these were written in the Persian, which was the language of administration under the Delhi Sultans. Now friends, in the picture you will see what is the process of writing the manuscript. Okay, you see in the first image you had to prepare the paper, then they used to write the text, then gold was melted to highlight the important words. Okay, just now today we highlight the text in the Adobe PDF. Okay, so at that time they had to melt the gold for highlighting the important words. So see the importance of gold. And fourth, they had to prepare the binding. So this was such a cumbersome process of writing the manuscript. Now friends, some information about the Tawariks. Okay, the authors were learned men, for example secretaries, administrators, poets and courtiers, who both recounted the events. Recount means to give an account of event. Who they both gave an account of event as well as advised the rulers on the governance, emphasizing the importance of just rule. From here you will learn the concept of circle of justice. A king cannot survive without soldiers, and soldiers cannot live without the salaries. Salaries come from the revenue collected from peasants, but peasants can pay revenue only when they are prosperous and happy. This happens when the king promotes justice and honest governance. So this was called the circle of justice, and I think this was an appropriate term to describe the relationship between king and his subjects. Now, moving on further, we will learn about the additional details about the Tawariks. The authors of Tawarik, they lived in cities, mainly Delhi, and they hardly ever lived in villages. They often wrote their histories for sultans in the hope of rich rewards. These authors advised rulers on the need to preserve an ideal social order based on birthright and gender restrictions. What is birthright? Privileges claimed on account of birth. That is, people believed that the nobles inherited their rights to govern because they were born in certain families, like Raja ka beta Raja banega. Okay, it was simple. Another was gender distinction. Now there are two things under this. Just remember always social as well as biological differences. See, biological differences are natural differences between men and women, but social differences are created by human beings. So these differences are used to argue that men are superior than women. We have an evidence of this discrimination in 1236. Sultan Iltutmish's daughter Razia Sultan, she became the ruler. Okay, there was one famous chronicle writer, Minhaj Siraj. He recognized that she was more able and qualified than all her brothers, but still he was not comfortable at having her as a queen. Why? Because she was woman. मिनहाज सिराज जैसे लोग रहेंगे तो women का तो oppressment होना पक्का ही है. Okay, nor were the nobles happy at her attempts to rule independently. Okay, what is a noble? A person of certain rank or class. Means even nobles of the king court, they were also not happy with her rule. So she was removed from the throne in 1240. So almost 4 years only she ruled, Razia Sultan. So here is a detailed account of what Minhaj-e-Siraj thought about Razia Sultan. He thought that the queen's rule went against the ideal social order created by the god. These lines were so discriminatory. On her inscriptions and coins, Razia mentioned that she was the daughter of Sultan Iltutmish. This was in contrast to the Queen Rudrama Devi of the Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal. Rudrama Devi changed her name on her inscriptions and pretended that she was a man. So this shows that at that time there was so much fear in the society about having women as a ruler. Now another queen, she ruled in Kashmir. Okay, her title is interesting. It comes from Didi or elder sister, an affectionate term given to a loved ruler by her subjects. That is, in Kashmir at that time, women were regarded as appropriate for the ruling post. Now, friends, do you think it was difficult for women to be a ruler? Here we have question. So yes, it was very difficult for a woman to be a ruler because of her belonging to a subordinate gender according to the social setup at that time. Our next topic is from garrison town to empire. Before moving, let us learn the meaning of these words. What is hinterland? The lands adjacent to a city or port that supply it with the goods and services. What is a garrison town? It is a fortified settlement with soldiers. Now, in the early 13th century, the control of the Delhi sultans rarely went beyond heavily fortified towns occupied by the garrisons. The sultans seldom controlled the hinterland of the cities and were therefore dependent upon the trade, tribute, or plunder for supplies. Controlling the garrison towns in distant Bengal and Sindh from Delhi was extremely difficult. Rebellion, war, even bad weather could snap the fragile communication routes. The state was also challenged by the Mongol invasions from Afghanistan and by governors who rebelled at any sign of the Sultan's weakness. The Sultanate barely survived these challenges. Its expansion occurred during the reigns of Ghiyasuddin Balban, Alauddin Khalji, and Muhammad Tughlaq. I have highlighted the period of ruling of these rulers. Okay, the first set of campaigns along the internal frontier. Now you should know what is the internal frontier. These were the surrounding regions of the Delhi. So the first set of campaign along the internal frontier was launched. Okay, it was aimed at consolidating the hinterlands of the garrison towns. During these campaigns, the forests were cleared in the Ganga Yamuna Doab. What is a Doab? It is an area of land between two converging rivers. For example, let us say you have this Ganga river and you have Yamuna river. Okay, and both the rivers are converging. Then this area will be called Doab. Okay. So during these campaigns, the forests were cleared and hunter-gatherers and pastoral peoples, they were expelled from their habitats. These lands were given to peasants and agriculture was encouraged. New fortresses and towns were established to protect the trade routes and to promote the regional trade. Hence, during the first campaign of strengthening the internal frontiers, okay, the regional trade was made more strong. Okay, trade routes were protected and new fortresses and towns came up. Now, the second leg of the expansion was along the external frontier of the Sultanate. External frontier means the outer part of the Delhi, that is around the South India. The military expeditions were sent to southern India, started during the reign of Alauddin Khilji and culminated with the Muhammad Tughlaq. Culminated means ended. In their campaigns, Sultanate armies captured elephants, horses, slaves and carried away the precious metals. By the end of the Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, that is after 150 years, the armies of the Delhi Sultanate had marched across large part of the subcontinent. So they have almost covered large part of the subcontinent during the 150 years. You can see in the map Alauddin Khilji campaigns into South India. He started around 1301. Okay, in a period of almost 10 to 11 years, that is up till 1311, he has captured a large part of the subcontinent. The Delhi Sultanate collected taxes from the peasantry and dispensed justice in its ruling. But how complete and effective was his control over such a vast territory? That we will learn when we will study the administration of the Delhi Sultans in the later part of this chapter. Now friends, what is the masjid? A mosque is called a masjid in Arabic, literally a place where Muslim prostrates in reverence to Allah. What is a prostrate? It is basically it is the term for low lying position when face is low towards the ground. It is done in respect of God. In a congregational mosque, what is the meaning of congregation? It is assembly for worship. Muslims read their prayers together. Members of the congregation choose the most respected learned male as their leader for the rituals of prayer. He also delivers the sermon during the Friday prayer. During prayer, Muslims stand facing Makkah. In India, this is to the west. This is called Qibla. Now friends, the Delhi Sultans, they built several mosques and cities all over the subcontinent. These demonstrated their claims to be protectors of Islam and Muslims. Mosques also helped to create the sense of a community of believers who shared a belief system and a code of conduct. It was necessary to reinforce this idea of a community because Muslims came from a variety of backgrounds. Now friends, if you see in these figures, there are a variety of mosques shown in these figures. What are the similarities and differences do you note? So if you see in these two figures, okay, you will find that there is an entrance gate. There is a big entrance gate in all these mosques. You see there is a big entrance gate. Okay, here also you will see this is a big entrance gate of the mosque. Differences, you will find that there are 3 windows in this figure near the entrance gate, but in this figure there is a 1 window only. There is also 1 window. And another difference, if you see here, there is a surrounding wall on the tomb, okay, but there is no wall on this tomb. Now we will study the administration and consolidation under the Khaljis and Tughlaqs. The consolidation of a kingdom as vast as the Delhi Sultanate, it needed the reliable governors and administrators. But rather than appointing the aristocrats and landed chieftains as governors, now here aristocrat means from the ruling class and chieftains were the leader of a clan or tribe, but chief means the leader of a people. So rather than appointing them, the early Delhi sultans, especially Iltutmish, it favored their special slaves purchased for military service called bandagans in Persian. They were carefully trained to man some of the most important political offices in the kingdom. Since they were totally dependent upon their master, the Sultan could trust and rely upon them. The ruling period of the Iltutmish I have highlighted 1210 to 1236. So, can you think of any reason why a slave would be better than a son? Because in the old age of the master, a slave would be more loyal than the son. At that period, it was thought so. The Khaljis and Tughlaqs, now the combined ruling period of these two dynasties was 1290 to 1414. So they continued to use the Bandagan and also raised people of humble birth who were often their clients to high political positions. That is, they raised the Bandagans to high political positions. They offered them high positions. They were appointed as generals and governors. However, this also introduced an element of political instability. Why this did happen? Because slaves and clients were loyal to their masters and patrons but not to their heirs. Okay. Heir, what is an heir? It is a person legally entitled to post after someone's death. So new sultans had their own servants. As a result, the accession of a new monarch often saw conflict between the old and the new nobility. Accession means attainment of a power. So there was conflict between the old and the new nobility. The patronage of these humble people by Delhi sultans also shocked many elites, and the authors of Persian Tawarikhs criticized the Delhi sultans for appointing the low caste people to high offices. So why do you think Barani criticized the sultan? Okay, he was a 14th century chronicler. He reported their appointments of the Bandagans as a sign of the sultan's loss of political judgment and his incapacity to rule. Now friends, what is a monarch? He is a head of state for life or until abdication, that is until someone thrashes the power from him. Now like the earlier sultans, the Khalji and Tughlaq monarchs, they appointed these military commanders as governors of territories of varying sizes. Now this is important. These lands were called Iqta and their holder was called Iqtadar or Mukti. The duty of the Muktis was to lead the military campaigns and maintain law and order in their Iqtas, that is their lands. In exchange for their military services, these commanders, that is Muktis, collected the revenues of their assignments as salary, that is they received the revenues as salary from the monarchs. They also paid their soldiers from these revenues. Control over Muktis was most effective if their office was not inheritable and if they were assigned Iqtas for a short period of time before being shifted. So this is obvious, okay. The monarch could exercise control over the military commanders if their office was not inheritable, that is they were not changing frequently, and if they were assigned Iqtas for a short period of time. Otherwise, if they were assigned land for a long period of time, then it could lead to the claim of the land by the military commander. These harsh conditions of service were rigorously imposed during the reigns of Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Accountants, these were appointed by the state to check the amount of revenue collected by the muktis. Care was taken that the mukti collected only the taxes prescribed by the state and that he kept the required number of soldiers. So these military commanders and their activities, it was thoroughly monitored by the Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq, their acquaintance. As the Delhi Sultans, they brought the hinterland of the cities under their control. They forced the landed chieftains, that is the Samanta aristocrats. We have learnt in class 6 what is a Samanta. They were the military people who provided law and order support to the kings. Under Alauddin Khalji, the state brought the assessment and collection of land revenue under its own control. Okay, so this is an important point. The rights of the local chieftains to levy taxes, it was cancelled, and they were also forced to pay taxes. So local chieftains means the leader of the local tribes or clans. They used to collect taxes, but now they were forced to pay taxes now. The Sultan administrators measured the land and kept careful accounts. Some of the old chieftains and landlords served the Sultanate as revenue collectors and assessors. There were three types of taxes on cultivation called kharaj and amounting to about 50% of the peasant produce. That is, whatever peasants or agricultural laborers produced, 50% of them was given to the Sultanate. And there was taxes on cattle and on houses also. It is important to remember that large parts of the subcontinent remained outside the control of the Delhi Sultans. It was difficult to control the distant provinces like Bengal from Delhi, and soon after annexing southern India, annexing means to add to its own territory, the entire region became independent. Even in the Gangetic Plain, there were forested areas that Sultanate forces could not penetrate. Local chieftains established their rule in these regions. Okay, sometime rulers like Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq could force their control in these areas, but only for a short duration. Ibn Battuta, he was a 14th century traveler from Morocco. He explained how chieftains sometimes fortified themselves in mountains, in rocky, uneven and rugged places, okay, so as to protect themselves from the rulers. Okay, so describe the ways in which chieftains arranged for their defense. Okay, if you read this paragraph, you will understand. They used to hide in the forest, dense forests, because in India the bamboo is not hollow, it is big. It is so intertwined that fire even cannot affect them, and they are on the whole very strong. So chieftains, they used to live in these forests. Okay, these were the leaders of the tribal people. Now the Mongols under the Genghis Khan invaded Transoxiana in northeast Iran in 1219, and the Delhi Sultanate faced their onslaught soon after. Mongol attacks on the Delhi Sultanate increased during the reigns of Alauddin Khalji and in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's rule. This forced the two rulers to mobilize a large standing army in Delhi, which posed a huge administrative challenge. Now we will see how the two sultans dealt with the attack of the Mongols. So Alauddin Khilji, if we read the first point, Delhi was attacked twice in 1299 and 1302 as a defensive measure. You see, Alauddin Khilji was more of a defensive. He raised a large standing army. Now under Muhammad Tughlaq, the Sultanate was attacked in the early years of the Muhammad Tughlaq's reign. What was the early years? 1324, okay, to 1351. The Mongol army was defeated. Muhammad Tughlaq was confident about the strength of his army and his resources to plan an attack on Transoxiana. He therefore raised a large standing army. Now, Alauddin constructed a new garrison town named Siri for his soldiers. Okay, you can see in the map 1. Rather than constructing a new garrison town, the oldest of the four cities of Delhi, that is Delhi Kona, was emptied and the soldiers were garrisoned there. The residents of the old city were sent to the new capital of Daulatabad in the south. Now the soldiers were also to be fed. So how was this done in these two dynasties? This was done through the produce collected as tax from the lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. Tax was fixed at 50% of peasants' yield. Now under Tughlaq, he also collected the tax to feed the army, but to meet the need of the large soldiers, he also levied additional taxes, and this also coincided with the famine in the area. Now fourth difference was payment. The soldiers had to be paid. Alauddin chose to pay his soldiers' salaries in cash rather than iktas, that is in land. Okay, the soldiers would buy their supplies from merchants in Delhi, and it was thus feared that merchants would raise their prices. So to stop this, Alauddin controlled the prices of goods in Delhi. Okay, this is an important point. Prices were carefully surveyed by officers, and merchants who did not sell at the prescribed rates were punished. What Muhammad Tughlaq did, he also paid his soldiers in cash salaries. But instead of controlling the prices, he used a token currency, somewhat like present day paper currency. Let me make it clear that token currency, it was made out of cheap metals, okay, and Muhammad Tughlaq asked people to consider it as an equal value of gold and silver coins, because there was limited supply of gold and silver at that time. Hence it was not possible to mint the gold and make the actual gold and silver coins. So introduced this token currency, which he asked people to consider it as an equivalent to real gold and silver coins. People in the 14th century did not trust these coins. They were very smart. They saved their gold and silver coins and paid all their taxes to the state with this token currency. So this cheap currency could also be counterfeited easily. Now, Alauddin's administrative measures were quite successful, and chroniclers, they praised his reign for its cheap prices and efficient supplies of goods in the market. He successfully withstood the threat of Mongol invasions. However, Muhammad Tughlaq's administrative measures were a failure. His campaign into Kashmir was a disaster. He then gave up his plans to invade the Transoxiana and disbanded his large army. Meanwhile, his administrative measures created complications. The shifting of people to Daulatabad was resented. The raising of taxes and famine in the Ganga-Yamuna belt led to widespread rebellion. And finally, the token currency had to be recalled. Let us quickly now solve these questions. Which ruler first established his capital at Delhi? We have read Tomar Rajputs were the first. What was the language of administration under the Delhi Sultans? It was Persian. In whose reign did the Sultanate reach its farthest extent? We have seen that Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq, they helped in expanding the empire. From which country did Ibn Battuta travel to India? It was Morocco in Africa. Now, according to the Circle of Justice, why was it important for military commanders to keep the interest of peasantry in mind? So we have read that if peasants were honest and happy, then only they will pay the taxes, and if they will not pay the taxes, then military commanders will not get their revenue from the rulers. What is meant by external and internal frontiers? So we have read internal frontiers were the areas lying in the close neighborhood of the Delhi, and it extended up to the Ganga Yamuna Doab. External frontiers mean the areas that lie far away from Delhi, that is South India. What were the steps taken to ensure that Muktis performed their duties? Why do you think they may have wanted to defy the orders of the sultans? So we have read their office was not made hereditary, okay. They were assigned iktas for a short period of time, and accountants were appointed to check the amount of revenue collected by the muktis, and it was also checked that muktis collected only those taxes which were prescribed by the state. Now why they wanted to defy? Because they controlled the money and military resources and were capable to rebel against the sultans. What was the impact of the Mongol invasions on the Delhi Sultanate? We have seen it led to many military and market reforms. For example, a vast standing army was established under Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Okay, and they had also increased the taxes. For example, Alauddin Khilji collected 50% more revenue from the peasants. Soldiers were paid cash salaries instead of iktas. Okay, Muhammad Tughlaq also introduced token currency in order to mobilize resources to fight the Mongol army. Okay, he also planned to invade the Mongol capital in Transoxiana, but plan was cancelled. So these were the some of the reforms. Do you think the authors of Tawarikh would provide information about the lives of ordinary men and women? No, they were appointed by sultans to write about their political careers. Razia Sultan was unique in the history of Delhi Sultanate. Do you think women leaders are accepted more readily? So yes, today we have changed scenario. Now, for example, Indira Gandhi became a successful leader as Prime Minister of India, and we have even many chief ministers and high positions. Many women are there. So we are now moving towards women related reforms. Why were these Delhi sultans interested in cutting down forest, and does deforestation occur for the same reason today? See, they wanted to cut the forest because they wanted to expand their empire, okay, and they also wanted to collect more land revenue. Hence, if there will be more cultivation, then only they will get the more land revenue. But today, forests are cut for the extension of agriculture and establishment of industrial units, which also leads to pollution.